Hopefully I got enough battery to share this. This one important, I think, is an important email anyway. It's very interesting and quite the capture. Good picture. It's from British Columbia. There's a bear right there. It's a pretty big bear I saw a minute ago. Almost thought about tagging him. Now, listen to this one and check out this photograph. Golden BC encounter with photo and disturbing truths. Considering that I obtained permission to share this account and the accompanying photo over a month ago, but couldn't find the time to type it out, I feel obligated to sincerely thank you, Steve, for all the time and work it must take to do what you're doing. Oh, I get it, man, I get it. Having seen what I've seen, and having had several completely sane, honest, good men relay their accounts of these creatures to me personally, I know that strange and disturbing things are real, and within our society must exist conspiracies which extend to the highest level. Regarding other members of the club, we are not crazy, the world is crazy. When people, including family, are too ignorant, naive, or most likely just too afraid to believe what you saw, one can feel alone and helpless, which is, as you would say, a shit-eating experience. I know what I know, whether anyone believes me or not, even if it's just strangers online. I take comfort in the fact that the people who share their experiences on this channel believe me just as I believe the lion's share of their stories. I don't know if you remember recounting an experience that I sent in called "We Signaled It In, Bad Idea." In my account, you read my name is Jorson Kashuba from Drumheller, Alberta. And I flashed my flashlight at some sort of a UFO, then suddenly my friend and I were underneath an incredibly bright light, and at the same time we heard a terrifying multiple octave scream/howl come from the woods. In the same email, I made mention that I have had several terrifying experiences, and as I was not afraid to tell people, and that's why other friends of mine told me about their Sasquatch encounters, but I needed permission to share what they told me. You said, tell them about the channel. And so I talked to a few friends and got the go-ahead to share this and a few other things from others, which I will send you another time. Sometime, when I really have time, I will write out some more of my stories, some which are disturbing, and explain some of my theory of what all this means. But in the meantime, Dale is a professional photographer from Drumheller. He specializes in nature photos of the Albertan Badlands, Canadian Rockies, and the Northern Lights. He is talented. His photos are in calendars and sold to various parties for advertising and whatnot, and he has a studio in town where he sells prints, mostly during the tourist season. He used a technique sometimes called time exposure, wherein the lens is left open for 8 to 10 seconds to allow more light to register on the image. This is how he gets the Northern Lights to appear so vividly, and how the Hubble telescope was able to take the deep field experiment. Imagine wherein the darkest space in the night sky revealed hundreds of distant galaxies. This comes into play later in the story. Dale knew of an area outside of Golden, BC, where, if he hiked over the mountain where he parked, there was a valley full of old-growth Douglas fir and hemlock that had never been logged, and fast-moving mountain stream which could surely be followed up the mountain to a waterfall which had probably never been properly photographed before. Dale and his wife set out on a summer morning in 2013 or 14 on a 14-kilometer hike, the plan being to arrive at the far side of this valley, where are the headwaters of the stream, were located, and set up camp there. It took them until late afternoon to go over the first mountain down to the other side, and about halfway up the far side of this valley, when they began to notice something, or more accurately, multiple things pacing them in the deep woods, making noises, tree knocks, and whoops. Dale had never looked into this topic particularly, and had no idea of what other people had been experiencing, but he and his wife figured out quickly what was going on, taking into account how remote they were in the British Columbia old-growth forest. They could hear heavy footfalls of the creatures just outside of sight, and sometimes even catch glimpses of reddish-brown fur as they darted from tree to tree, just out of sight in the dark timber. pouring rain coming. I gotta cover this camera. Hope I get through this right now. It's starting to rain. Dale had never looked into this topic particularly and had no idea of what other people had been experiencing, but he and his wife figured out quickly what was going on, taking into account how remote they were in British Columbia old-growth forest. They could hear heavy footfalls of the creatures just out of sight, and sometimes even catch glimpses of reddish-brown fur as they darted from tree to tree just out of sight in the dark timber. Terrified, knowing that they're out of cell phone, and that nobody else would be anywhere near where they were, they had no choice but to keep going and to hope to find a spot to camp out for the night on the mountain. They reached the waterfall, and they correctly assumed would be on this mountain, and then set up their tent just as the sun was going down. Dale described this as the longest night of his life. Unarmed, they lay silently in their small tent all night as the creatures actively intensified in the woods just outside of their tent. At one point in the night, Dale said he heard incredibly heavy footsteps running quickly toward the tent, and just as they braced themselves to be trampled or otherwise attacked, this giant creature jumped or stepped right over the top of their tent and continued running off in the other direction. This is going on for hours, to the point that if it was going to kill them, it could have many times, and they felt like the creatures were purposely trying to scare them to death. At first light, and having not heard any activity for some time, they got out of the tent and quickly started making their way back down the mountain when Dale stopped. After that hike and all that insanity, he figured, I might as well stop and get my damn photo of this waterfall. So he set up his tripod and pointed at the waterfall, which was barely visible, as the naked eye can see, but by doing an 8-second exposure, he would be able to capture the waterfall. The trees, which just looked like shadows, black shadows, to the naked eye, and even the stars, which were fading into the morning sky. As he captured the image, Dale got the distinct feeling that he was being stared at, and it was time to leave, period. Weeks later, when looking through the photos that they had taken on this vacation, his wife pointed it out. Dale never noticed it until she pointed it out in the photo, and when he showed me the photo, I never noticed it until pointed it out. At the base of the 100 to 120 foot old growth Douglas firs, at the top of the waterfall, there he is, 9 to 11 feet tall. This experience scared Dale and his wife enough that they will never camp remotely in a tent ever again. I seen this photo and heard the story around 10 years ago, and after you read my story, I did as you suggested. I told him about the channel and told him that we're going to find out what these things are and if it would be all right if I sent in his account and photo to you to read on the channel. Thanks, Steve. Another day I will send Randy's account in Ypres, Alberta, Matt's story about the Sasquatch that lives on the north side of the highway of his father-in-law's land, who is a Cree elder, in Buck Lake, Alberta, and eventually a series of strange events which occurred to myself and some of my theory about what's going on. P.S. The globalist Quisling who says, you will own nothing but you'll be happy, and all these puppets that intend to control us and enslave us can only accomplish their goal by dividing us and using our own fear as a weapon against us. I believe that they are about to make a big move. Don't fear other people unless they are about to physically harm you. Take care. And there's the photos, and that is a creepy ass capture, and the visual of this photograph is obviously has been described to a T from how many people now? How many different people have described this visual? Numerous times from around the globe. Many. Let's make sure there's no bear behind me. That's an incredible capture. It's funny how anything can hide in the shadows. We do too. I do it all the time when I'm hunting. Use shadows to my benefit. It's an easy thing. Humans are very, very easy to elude. Very easy. Out here in the real world. Yeah, I totally remember your email, man. Appreciate it. And I appreciate you going out of your way to do this. And to the people who went on that hike, I'm glad you found this channel. You're obviously not alone. There's nothing to be scared of here. The big old growth forest definitely has, there's a big strong connection to these beings with old growth forest for sure. But as well as desert areas as well, there's sightings. But here in Canada, in the Pacific Northwest, big old growth timber sure seems to be a key feature, doesn't it? That's where I spend a lot of my time, in the interior of BC. Usually, on the coast here, although the Vancouver Island doesn't have too much old growth left. But anyway, that is quite the share, quite the experience. What a terrifying, shit-eating experience to have, especially when you're not looking for it. They're just going hiking, no weapons, not hunting, not fishing, not logging. They're just going out to take pictures of the beautiful world that we all live on and share, right? And look what happened to them. And those beings running at the tent, jumping over it, they must have been laughing their faces off while they were doing it, without a doubt. They were absolutely clowning around and entertaining the shit out of themselves, don't you think? What a shitty thing to do to people, to innocent people. You know? It's not that cool of a thing to do to people, to do to anyone, to intentionally scare the living shit out of them. Not cool. Not cool at all. I still got some battery left, and the rain seems to slow it a little bit, so let's do another one. I can't wait to hear back from you, man. I can't wait, all right? So send what you got when you can, and I'll get to it for sure, okay, man? POW Island, Alaska. Sasquatch Speak. Hi, Steve. This is my second email. First was my experience in Wisconsin with the night turning to daylight and having missing time. I remember that. That's creepier than shit. This email is strictly Bigfoot related, and you can use my name. I thought I would include this short video clip just for its audio of what I heard. You may play it as well, if it sends. If not, I'll have to change it to a smaller format. A little about me: I'm 56 years old, an avid hunter and fisherman, certified all-around butcher, and also certified for wildlife and forestry management. We lived in Wisconsin, Minnesota, South Dakota, California, New Jersey, and my favorite spot, Ketchikan, Alaska. Alaska's one of my favorite places as well. I've had multiple experiences out in the woods. I'm not saying that all these were Bigfoot, but I feel that they are. The first time I ran into something strange happening in the woods was in southwest Wisconsin, 78 or 79. My friend and I were hiking in the woods of the Driftless area we live in, and we're on a well-used snowmobile trail that is used to be a logging road. Headed for home after a day of just wandering the woods. About a half mile or so from town, we noticed something very heavy sounding, crunching brush and traveling parallel to us as we hiked the trail. It sounded like it was within 30 yards, but the woods were open enough that we could see that far clearly. We could spot nothing. Every time we'd start walking, it would also. And when we stopped abruptly to see if it was some sort of audio anomaly coming from the fall leaves, it took 2 more steps than we did. Whatever it was so close, it was pacing us out of the woods, and it was heavy. After the third stop to verify that it wasn't our imagination, we ran as fast as we could with the feeling of something clipping your heels as it chases you, but seeing nothing. My second adventure would come several years later in the same area of Wisconsin, rolling hills, apple orchards, fresh water, springs, and corn all around. A friend of mine and myself decided to go out and pick some morel mushrooms. They're plentiful here most years and fetch a good price. We were 1 mile from an orchard and a small wooded draw, only 150 yards from the road and 250 yards to the crest of the hillside we were foraging on, both of us paying attention to the ground in front of us. Suddenly jerked our heads up as a volleyball-sized rock flew over our heads and rolled through the woods till it crashed into a tree downhill from us. We were at least 50 yards from any rock outcropping, and the hill was gradual enough that it couldn't have flown itself. We didn't run right away. We were still processing what just happened as another rock the size of a softball came through the trees and bounced off the ground in front of us. I do remember looking and seeing nothing in the woods briefly before we started our sprint from the woods. 15 feet from the road we were parked on, we had a tight barbed wire fence to cross as we came barreling down. This fat guy went from a full run to a back flop slide under a 5-strand fence without missing a beat. We had an urgency to leave and go elsewhere. It's amazing what adrenaline can make us do, right? It's amazing. Those are my 2 Wisconsin experiences, and now I'll tell you the 2 from Alaska. First of all, my ex-wife was Coast Guard. We chose to be stationed in Alaska in the beautiful city of Ketchikan. Spent 5 years there. I decided to hunt black bear for the first time, and a friend I made in Ketchikan recommended a spot for me to hunt in George Inlet. I hunted there quite often to better learn the area. I noticed near the logging road that there were spruce trees broken off at the top. The trees probably would have been 16 to 18 feet if the tops were not broken off. Every tree had about 4 feet missing, fresh breaks. I asked my friend the next day, "Did black bears do this?" And she told me, yes, it's quite common. So I didn't even give myself a chance to think Sasquatch until about 4 days later. I had that feeling that someone or something was stalking me. I was being watched by something. I came to a bridge over the creek where I had a good 40 foot of logging road on either side of me. Thought it'd be a good spot to spin around on my heels, rifle ready, and see what I knew was following me. About 80 yards out into the blueberries and woods, I see a large black something ducking down as I'm coming around on my heels. I chalked it up to black bear until I got out of the woods and back into the boat. The last bit is my most profound experience in Alaska. That's hunting Prince of Wales for black-tailed deer and black bear at the same time. I had a friend from Wisconsin up to visit and do a week-long hunt in POW, Prince of Wales. If you go, I recommend Whale Pass area. Each day was spent exploring different sections of logging roads, muskegs, alpines, and the occasional quarry. We put a lot of miles in the truck at 10 miles per hour searching for game. We were out on this particular day/evening, and we're on our way back to Whale Pass to camp. It was still a good 45 minutes to an hour or so before we'd make it back to camp, but it had already gotten dark on us, really dark, no moon dark. So we decided to pull over, stretch our legs, let the bed sores on our asses heal a bit, and take a piss. We got out of the truck and do just that. After I finished peeing, I lit a cigarette and take in the peaceful sound of the water lapping the shoreline near an area called El Capitan Creek. I was parked close enough to the shoreline to be able to hear that between my truck and the ocean was a small line of trees just above the high tide line. Out of the darkness, I estimate 25 to 30 yards at most to my left, I hear a Sasquatch speak. Then about the same distance from me off to my right, I reply in Bigfoot speak. Then about the same distance from me off to my right, I reply in Bigfoot speak. The conversation went on for multiple replies. Meanwhile, my mind is thinking, seal, bear, wolverine, marten? No. I got a chill up my back, and brother, it was time to go. We headed back to camp, speechless all the way. This is the language they have, clearly conversation, just as any other human may have in another foreign language. Only it seems to be mixed with high and low squeals and guttural grunts. I did the best I could to imitate on the video clip of what I heard, and as you say, Steve, I know what it was, even though I've never seen one. Thanks for bringing out the truth. Thanks for bringing out the truth and for your persistence thereof. Jim Holler. P.S. Video attached. Okay, I don't have it in my notes. I will have to dig back and find it. And if I screw up, because I won't be home for 4 days, and I post this video without it, it's an accident, and I will post it on the following video. Okay? Thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it. Alaska's a beautiful place, and it as well has shit piles of experiences there. They most definitely have language, that's proven. You can thank Ron Moorhead for confirming that for the world, quite easily by the looks of it too. One more. Hey Steve, Luke here again. You shared my first experience a few months back with that damn thing barking at us up by Mount Lawson back in '87. Thought I would share something more current, though it won't add anything to the puzzle. If anything, I think it just adds more to the weirdness factor of this topic. I live about 20 minutes from the upper Sacramento River here in North California. Some years back, I found a pullout along the river where I can park and take a trail through the woods to a nice place along the river. It's about a 60-yard walk through the thick woods before it really opens up. And I got in the habit of taking the dogs down there a few times a week once the weather starts to warm up in the spring. Though out of the way, it's not a totally private place. I've run into people there before. But I found that if I avoid the weekends, I almost always have the place to myself. It was also about this time I started doing some rock hounding. While the dogs ran around and swam in the river, I would check out the rocks, and if I found them interesting enough, I'd put them in a satchel I carried over my shoulder and take them home. One morning we had a very large tree pushed over back behind us. It sounded real close, maybe 30-40 yards from us. When I first heard the initial crack of the tree going, I spun around and seen absolutely nothing moving. And even though I could hear breaking branches and the final thump hitting the ground, there wasn't a thing moving. No branches swaying, no birds fluttering out, nothing. It was so close. How could I not see any movement? I tried to rationalize it. Old trees fall, beavers fell trees, the wind. I looked around and not a hint of a breeze could be found. Our weekly trek stretched out into summer, and one morning after I pulled my truck off the road, I walked around to the back to let the dogs out, and right there where I always park was a single stack of rocks about 15 inches high. They were all rather flat, not that big. The bottom, the biggest rock, was maybe the diameter of a soda can, and they got smaller as they got higher, and they were most definitely from the river. The only rocks you find up by the road is gravel. I reached out and barely touched the top rock as they tumbled to the ground. It was so delicate that a breeze... Plastic bag blew off. It was so delicate that a breeze could have toppled it over. Once again, I tried to rationalize it. People stack rocks, right? The next week, the dogs and I had the place to ourselves, and we were doing the usual swimming and rock hounding. After about an hour and a half, we headed back to the truck. About halfway, the dogs were stopped in the middle of the trail, heads down, sniffing something. I thought, what did you guys find now? When I got up to them, right there in the middle of the dirt trail was about 50 rocks, all similar in size and shape and placed in a grid pattern. They were evenly spaced about 3 inches apart in almost a perfect square. I thought, what the hell? Now, there were no cars parked there when we got there. The rocks were not there when we walked in, and no one came down there while we were there, or I would have surely seen them. And the dogs definitely would have alerted me to someone coming down. I went to take a picture only to find I left my phone back home. I planned on coming back the next day to take a pic, but it wasn't until the day after I came back with my phone. The rocks were gone, not scattered or kicked off the trail by someone walking by. Gone, not a trace. Now the kicker. The very next week we were doing the usual. It was getting hot, and the dogs and I sat back up in the shade of some young willows along the bank, resting up and enjoying the morning. Downriver, I could hear the whoomp, whoomp, whoomp of helicopter blades. As you well know, helicopters aren't rare these days, so I didn't think nothing of it at first. But as it got closer, it got louder and louder. And I thought, damn, this thing's low. And sure enough, a minute or so later, here comes this helicopter around the bend, and damn, he was low. I'm gonna grab my plastic bag, it's gonna blow away. There's another bear coming out over there. I figured he couldn't have been more than 20 feet off the water. And when he got right parallel to me, he was so close I could feel the wash from the blades. But the shocker was, the helicopter was jet black and not a marking on it. Both doors were open, and I could see right through. And perched in each door was a man. The guy on my side was in a black tactical gear, and I could clearly see a long gun next to him. And, like the chopper, there wasn't an ID marking on him. No name tag, no badge, no insignias, nothing. We locked eyes. And my initial thought was to raise my hand and wave, but the stern look on his face changed my mind. Now, we got all kinds of choppers up here. There's a flight care chopper that lifts injured people to hospitals. It's blue and white, with call letters printed down the side. The sheriff chopper that's green and white and says sheriff down the side. The California fire chopper that is red and white, some orange and white, we call Cal Fire down the side. Now, who flies a jet black chopper with no letters carrying armed men in tactical gear? Coincidence that I was experiencing strange things down at the river and at home, and this mystery chopper showing up? It's so bizarre. Like you say, Steve, they know about these beings and aren't telling us about them. Why? Anyway, that's enough for now. As for the strangeness going on around my place, I will save that for another time. Be well, be safe. All the best to you and the family, Luke. Appreciate it, Luke. And I'm sure you know by now, if you've been looking into this topic yourself, people's experiences and accounts, there's no shortage of strange helicopters showing up on site where a lot of the stuff's going on. There just isn't. Do I know why? Why do they not tell? Why do they not share? Why do they not warn us? Why? Haven't a clue. Well, I've got a couple theories of my own. I've got it narrowed down to two, obviously. One is possibly that there are some beings out there that are absolutely dark and evil and have no good intent on humans. And the other solid reason I am convinced of is because if we find out the truth of these beings, we will find out the truth of us, and then the people who control us right now are in for a big shit show. That's what I think so far. But anyway, moving along, or should I try to squeeze in one more short one here? Make sure you email me back again with whatever you learn, all right? Email all of us, through me. Really appreciate that. Okay, where's a short one? Here's a real short one. Coincidence there. Mark this as read. It's titled Traumatic Encounter. I just found your channel. Thank you so much for listening to us. I had a horrific Sasquatch encounter last fall while elk hunting. I truly believe it was luring me into an ambush. My years of constant firearms training and hunting are the only thing that got it thinking twice at the culmination of the whole event. It ended with it getting extremely pissed off and letting me know to bugger off, and I did post haste. It severely impacted me with nightmares, increased drinking, etc. I, once again, appreciate people like you listening. Keep it up. Daniel J. Rogers. Daniel, share up what happened when you get a chance, man. We want to hear about it. Is that a helicopter behind me? Low? Pretty low, but it swung around before I got my eyes on it. Alright, tide's going out. Boat's out of sight around the bend. I better get back to it, make sure nothing's playing with it with their claws. That kind of sucked because I'm on an island right now. Be a little bit of a soggy trek back. Alright, I'm going to be back with more shortly. Didn't have the GoPro, so I can't. Obviously, by the time you see this one, it's going to be a handful of days of no videos being posted up, and it's because I don't have anything to I can load onto the phone out here where I am. That or the GoPro's back at home on the desk, so I'll get these shares out to you guys. We'll get all of them read and heard and shared no matter what. Onward we go.